Welcome back. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandra.
And I'm Hem Korsura. And on the show today, Prime Minister Modi is on his West Asia trip. He addressed the Indian community at the Grand Ahlan Modi event in Abu Dhabi on day one of his UAE visit. And he's now all set to inaugurate the BAPS Hindu Temple, the first ever Hindu temple in the United Arab Emirates. We'll bring you all the updates on this on the show.
Also on the show, we bring you the latest on the US foreign military aid bill, which remains in question. The US Senate approved the bill worth $95 billion, but its passage through Congress is not guaranteed yet. The bill needs to be cleared in the lower chamber of Congress as well. And the House Speaker Mike Johnson has indicated that the bill will go nowhere in his Republican majority lower chamber. All this and a lot more right here on World DNA in the next 60 minutes. Let's get you started with that.
After receiving a rousing welcome and attending the Grand Ahlan Modi event in the UAE, India's Prime Minister Modi is set to inaugurate BAPS Hindu Temple in Abu Dhabi later today.
Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz nominates former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif as next Premier to lead a new coalition alliance after elections return hung parliament.
Israeli military releases purported video of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar with his family members in a Gaza tunnel days after the October 7th attack.
US Senate passes $95 billion Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan aid bill. Legislation to head to Republican-controlled House of Representatives, leaving its chances of becoming law slim.
U.S. House Republicans impeached President Joe Biden's immigration chief Alejandro Mayorkas in the second attempt, blaming him for surge in illegal entries from Mexico.
Latest round of farmer protests enter day 2 in India. Protesters from Punjab state try to break barriers in Haryana and make their way to the national capital.
Manchester City resumed their Champions League campaign with a dominant display in Copenhagen. The defending champion beat the host 3-1 to close in on a quarter-final spot.
Finding De Bruyne, trying to tee it up for Foden. It's another magnificent Manchester City move. Pep Guardiola.
Now, a stadium full of eager Indian diaspora greeted the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on his 2-day visit to the UAE.
Well, the Ahlan Modi event echoed with the chants of Modi at Abu Dhabi's Sports Stadium. At an event that started with the national anthems of the two nations, the Indian Prime Minister praised the deepening synergy between the two nations when he said, "Long live India-UAE friendship."
अबू धाबी में ये भव्य दिव्य मंदिर के लोकार्पण का ऐतिहासिक समय आ गया है। साथियों, भारत यूएई की दोस्ती जितनी जमीन पर मजबूत है, उतना ही उसका परचम अंतरिक्ष में भी लहरा रहा है।
One of the key highlights of Prime Minister Modi's UAE trip is the opening of the Hindu temple BAPS, the first ever temple in the Gulf nation.
India's Prime Minister will inaugurate this stone-carved temple in Abu Dhabi later today. The BAPS temple sits on 27 acres that was gifted by the U.A.E. leadership. The construction cost of this architectural marvel is around 95 million USD. This temple in Abu Dhabi is built with sandstone from India's state of Rajasthan and marble from Italy.
The temple committee emphasizes on the communal harmony aspect behind the temple construction, and this is quite intriguing, Shiva. And it says that a Muslim king donated land for a Hindu temple where the lead architect is a Catholic Christian, the project manager a Sikh, and the foundational designer a Buddhist. The construction company is a Parsi group and the director comes from the Jain tradition.
Talking about India-UAE ties, the two nations are among each other's top trading partners. The bilateral trade touched about $85 billion in 2022-23. The UAE is also among the top 4 investors in India in terms of foreign direct investments.
Now, India invited the UAE as a special invitee for the G20 summit last year in New Delhi. With India's active support, the UAE joined SCO as dialogue partner in May 2023 and the BRICS as a member on the 1st of January.
Now, nearly a week after the Pakistani general elections ended inconclusively, we have a clear picture of the next government now.
Right. Former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif led PMLN and Bilawal Bhutto's PPP. They've joined hands to form an alliance, and former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's younger brother Shehbaz Sharif will be leading the alliance as the Prime Minister. Nawaz Sharif's daughter Maryam Nawaz meanwhile has been nominated for the post of Chief Minister for the Punjab province.
The PPP-PML alliance under Shehbaz Sharif ousted former Prime Minister Imran Khan's government in April 2022, triggering a month-long political turmoil in Pakistan. The conditions to join forces this time as well do not bode well for a stable or strong administration in the world's second largest Muslim country. Now, the alliance has ended uncertainty over government formation for now, after elections gave a split verdict, sparking worries of fresh instability. Nawaz Sharif's PMLN emerged as the largest political party in the National Assembly elections held on February 8th. The Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz got 75 seats. The PPP came in second with 54.
Now, additionally, the two parties will also get most of the 70 reserved seats, which are allotted to parties based on their strength. These seats are reserved for women and non-Muslims.
Jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan was not allowed to contest last week's elections. His Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party was stripped of its electoral symbol days right ahead of the polls. Hence, his party candidates had to run as independents.
Surprisingly, the independents, most of them backed by the PTI, won the largest share of seats in the National Assembly. Their tally stood at 91 of the 266 directly elected seats, but they're not eligible to form the government. The PTI has also ruled out any alliance with the PPP or PMLN. The PTI party, it's alleged that the vote was rigged and has vowed to legally challenge some results.
Meanwhile, Imran Khan has warned against the misadventure of forming a government with what he called stolen votes. He added that such daylight robbery will not only be a disrespect to the citizens, but will also push the country's economy further into a downward spiral.
Let's shift our focus now to the United States, where the U.S. Senate had approved the $60 billion in funding for Ukraine in a bill that the Republican House Speaker, Mike Johnson, has indicated will go nowhere.
He's already clear about what's going to happen with this bill. Of course, it has not made it past the Congress yet. It has got approval in the Senate. But the Republican majority lower chamber House Republicans have aligned with ex-President Donald Trump and have promised to reject the bill as written, which also includes military aid for Taiwan and Israel.
Now, the Republican leader of the U.S. House of Representatives on Tuesday blocked war aid for Ukraine, ignoring Biden's plea. Speaker Mike Johnson, who works closely with 2024 primary challenger Donald Trump, told reporters that he has no intention even of allowing a vote on the bill. At the White House, Biden said that helping U.S. allies, particularly coming to the aid of Kyiv as it struggles to fend off a Russian invasion, is a fundamental responsibility.
For Republicans in Congress who think they can oppose funding for Ukraine and not be held accountable, history is watching. History is watching. History is watching. Failure to support Ukraine at this critical moment will never be forgotten.
U.S. aid to Ukraine has been paralyzed for months by chaos in Congress. Even as Kiev begs for help to counter increased Russian attacks, the $95 billion Senate package includes funding for Israel's military and for democratic island Taiwan. However, the lion's share, $60 billion, would help Ukraine restock ammunition supplies, weapons and other crucial needs. It passed easily in the Senate when enough Republicans defied Trump's behind-the-scenes maneuvers.
Johnson then said that he could not address Ukraine's security without first having strict new measures to stop illegal migration into the United States across the Mexico border. Democrats in Senate had worked with Republicans to craft a bill which provided aid while at the same time imposing the harshest new border security measures in decades. That bill was primed for approval in the Senate when Johnson announced it would be killed in the House. And this then prompted the Senate to ditch that version and switch to Tuesday's new foreign aid-only bill, which was once again rejected by Johnson.
Republicans impeached U.S. President Joe Biden's immigration chief on Tuesday. It marked the culmination of months of attacks on the Democratic administration as they seek to make border security a key issue in November's election later this year. Biden has attacked Trump for using the border issue as a political battering ram. The U.S. president rebuked Republican lawmakers for impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Biden dubbed the move a blatant example of partisan politics that violated the U.S. Constitution. A powerful, fast-moving winter storm has blanketed the U.S. Northeast with heavy snow, and at least one person has died.
Now, this snowstorm, it's led to hazardous driving conditions, of course, for millions of Americans, while forcing schools to close down and wreaking havoc on air travel, particularly.
Now, from New York to New Jersey and from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania, accidents were reported on slippery roads. More than 1,000 flights were cancelled and many schools remained closed. Before the storm races out of the area, Boston is expected to get up to 9 inches of snow. The city's mayor has declared a state of emergency. According to the National Weather Service, parts of Pennsylvania and Connecticut could be hit by up to 15 inches of snow.
Well, here in northeast Pennsylvania, we anticipated a snowstorm, and sure enough, we got it. But it was a quick, very wet, with a lot of moisture in the snow. So with that much water in the snow, it's very heavy to pick up, very heavy on the tree branches.
Millions of people from West Virginia to New England were under a winter warning as the storm pummeled the region with heavy snow overnight. Officials urged people to take precautions, including staying off the roads. Far fewer people than usual are out and about, and if they were, residents were seen pushing to keep up with the coastal storm, making their way along snowy streets.
This is very wet, heavy snow. You can't use a snowblower. You have to shovel. It's not fun. Not fun to run in either. So I'm out here making sure people running and walking have a clear path.
Now, of course, let's shift our focus from the United States to what's happening in West Asia. Now, Tel Aviv is facing growing international pressure to agree to a ceasefire with Hamas.
Israel is preparing for an incursion into the crowded southern Gaza city of Rafah, where more than 1 million Palestinians are trapped. Now, U.S. CIA director met Mossad chief in Cairo for talks on a Qatari brokered plan to temporarily halt fighting in exchange for Hamas freeing hostages.
Now, Israel's military released a video that it said was from a security camera and in fact showed Gaza's Hamas chief and family members in a tunnel on the 10th of October. Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari said, and I'm quoting here, the footage shows leader of Hamas and mass murderer Yahya Sinwar fleeing with his children and one of his wives.
Citing a senior Egyptian official, Al Qaeda News stated the Cairo talks, which also involved Qatar's prime minister, were positive and would continue for 3 more days. The Cairo meeting came after US and UN warned Israel against a ground offensive into Rafah without a plan to protect civilians who say they have nowhere left to go. After White House talks with Jordan's King Abdullah II on Monday, Joe Biden said civilians in Rafah need to be protected, calling them exposed and vulnerable. UN humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths warned Israel's planned military push into Rafah, the last bastion of refuge for over 1 million Palestinians, could lead to a slaughter.
A report in the Wall Street Journal said Israel was proposing to create 15 campsites of around 25,000 tents each in southwestern Gaza as part of an evacuation plan. It cited Egyptian officials saying the camps and field hospitals would be installed and administered by Egypt, although there has been no confirmation on the same.
The impact of the wars has been felt widely, with violence involving Iran-backed allies of Hamas surging across West Asia. Lebanon's Hezbollah has traded near-daily fire with Israel since the war began in October last year. On Tuesday, the head of the Iran-backed movement, Hassan Nasrallah, said the cross-border fire would stop only when the attack on Gaza stops. US is reviewing reports of Israel that harmed civilians under guidelines aimed at ensuring nations getting US arms conduct operations in line with international humanitarian law.
The United States has angered some of West Asia allies by repeatedly refusing to back a full ceasefire. Washington says it supports Israel's drive to eradicate Hamas and calling for shorter pause with hostage prisoner swaps instead.
Meanwhile, Turkish President Erdogan is set to arrive in Cairo. Erdogan will meet his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, sealing a long-running rapprochement between the two regions. Now, Erdogan on Monday said the pair would discuss every effort to stop the bloodshed in the Gaza Strip. The visit will be the Turkish president's first to Egypt since 2012. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC of Iran, claimed it fired 2 long-range ballistic missiles from the Shahid Mahdavi warship in the Gulf of Oman.
The missiles, with a claimed range of at least 1,700 kilometers, hit targets in a desert in central Iran. The exercise was intended to be a simulated test strike against an Israeli base. Here's a report for more on this. Moving on now, Moscow is gearing up for a potential armed conflict with Western countries in the next decade.
This is what Estonia's Foreign Intelligence Service has claimed. The report also notes a significant rise in Russia's military production of artillery and armored vehicles that could enhance Russia's ability to continue fighting. Our next report tells you more.
Estonia says Russia is preparing for a military confrontation with the West within the next decade. Its Foreign Intelligence Service said on Tuesday that the assessment was based on Russia's plans to double the number of forces stationed along its border with Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. This is Kaupo Rosen, chief of the intelligence service.
And we also see that the Kremlin is probably anticipating a possible conflict with NATO within the next decade or so. That's from their perspective. Without specifying what does it exactly mean. Would it be a direct military action in Baltic states or somewhere else?
He says right now, Russia doesn't have the manpower, partly because it has to keep troops in Ukraine, and that NATO and its allies were moving in the right direction to counter the Russian threat. A growing number of Western officials have warned of a military threat from Russia to countries along the eastern flank of NATO, calling for Europe to get prepared by rearming. Estonia and the other Baltic states have increased their military spending since Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, and NATO allies have raised their presence in those countries. Germany, in its first permanent foreign deployment since World War II, plans to have 4,800 combat-ready troops in the region by 2027. Rosen added that unless Western support to Ukraine is sustained or increased, it is unlikely to be able to change the situation on the battlefield.
For the first time in almost a 2-year-old Russia-Ukraine war, Ukraine claims Russia fired an advanced hypersonic missile.
Now, it's a missile, of course, that experts claim is impossible to shoot down. The Kyiv Scientific Research Institute of Forensic Expertise has posted on Telegram that debris from last week's attack on the Ukrainian capital suggested the Russian military used a Zircon hypersonic cruise missile.
The footage shows the alleged missile wreckage with specific markings. The Kyiv Institute completed a preliminary analysis of the missile fragments from the attack. The Zircon has a range of 1,000 kilometers and travels at 9 times the speed of sound. Military analysts say that hypersonic speed greatly reduces reaction time for air defenses that allow attacks on large, deep and hardened targets.
The February 7th attack on Kyiv killed at least 5 people. It injured over 38 others at least. And Ukraine's Air Force said that apart from Zircon, Russian forces also fired 3 Iskander-ballistic missiles and 4 Kh-22 cruise missiles. Although air defenses have brought down the missiles in the past, Ukraine, it's reportedly not intercepted a single Kh-22 in the war so far.
Analysts caution not to exaggerate the use of the Zircon during the war, as it is a new and expensive technology.
And of course, the big question here remains on how many Russia has produced so far. With that, let's also shift our focus now. This is to Niger, where at least 4 people were killed and 40 others have been abducted after armed gunmen opened fire in northwest Nigeria. This is Nigeria on Tuesday.
Now, the Zamfara State Police have confirmed the assault and have deployed reinforcements at the site of the attack. As per the residents, the attackers hit the police station first, after which they went on to target civilian households. This assault was one in a chain of attacks by the armed group in the volatile northwest region. Now, let us remind you that Nigeria, which is Africa's biggest economy, faces issues such as banditry, violent attacks and kidnappings.
Moreover, President Bola Tinubu has been unable to control the cost of living crisis faced by the West African nation. The violence spiraled in January after unemployment and police instability increased in the region. And with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. Of course, this is World DNA. When we get back, Indonesians have begun voting in their presidential polls. Current Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto is the front-runner in the elections despite concerns over his human rights record and claims of improper support from outgoing leader Joko Widodo.
Also on the other side, after creating a fan frenzy in Japan with her concerts, Taylor Swift all set to take her music tour to Australia now. All details on the other side. Do stay tuned.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Protesting farmers back on the roads. Demanding higher minimum support price for their produce. Capital turns into a fortress. A little over 2 years after they called off their massive protest, chaos unfolds as farmers clash with police. The government says it has agreed to most of their demands, but big differences persist.
We are one, you and I. Burning in the sun. Rising in the rain. One in celebration. One in pain. One in a tragedy. One for our rights. One in search of hope. One in our fights. One beyond borders. One beyond our race.
This could be one
in the face of adversity. We are one, you and I, and it's our right to know how and why. WION, you are more connected than you know.
On the next episode of World of Africa, several hundred people demonstrate across different cities in Senegal following the postponement of the country's presidential election scheduled for February 25th, as President Macky Sall's ruling party Alliance for the Republic called for dialogue. A California museum returns 7 royal artifacts to Ghana's traditional Ashanti king to commemorate his silver jubilee in the first planned handovers of Ashanti treasures looted during colonial times. And an innovative firm in Kenya is gaining funds by turning waste from the pineapple's harvest into footwear. The fashion industry is embracing more eco-friendly materials. World of Africa, at these times only on WION. World is one.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
From New York, we get you to the sandy shores of Durban, where I'll bring you all the glitz, glam, and happenings from the world of showbiz.
Welcome to the Eras Tour.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation. Welcome back to World DNA. Thank you so much for staying with us. So far on the show, of course, we've gotten all the details of Prime Minister Modi's West Asia trip. It's day 2 of his Abu Dhabi visit, all set to inaugurate the BAPS temple in Abu Dhabi. We'll, of course, continue to track all developments on that front.
Also, we brought you updates from Pakistan, where an alliance has now been formed between the PMLN and the PPP. Shehbaz Sharif would be at the helm of affairs there. And, of course, in the US, the foreign military aid bill, it still remains in question as it's got a clearance in the Senate, but it will not pass through the lower chamber. At least that is what is being claimed by the House Speaker, Mike Johnson. Let's get you started with all the other headlines we're tracking for you at this hour. This is World DNA.
Outgoing Indonesian leader Joko Widodo casts his vote in Jakarta as the 200 million nation puts democracy to test.
After receiving a rousing welcome and attending the Grand Alan Modi event in U.A.E, India's Prime Minister set to inaugurate the BAPS Hindu temple in Abu Dhabi later today.
Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz nominates former Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif as the next premier to lead the new coalition alliance after elections return hung parliament.
Israeli military releases purported video of Hamas chief Yahya Sinwar with his family members in a Gaza tunnel days after the October 7th attack.
The U.S. Senate passes $95 billion Ukraine, Israel and Taiwan aid bill legislation to head to Republican-controlled House of Representatives, leaving its chances of becoming law very slim.
Latest round of farmer protests enter day 2 in India. Protesters from Punjab try to break barriers in Haryana and make their way to the national capital.
Brahim Diaz scores a stunning solo goal as Real Madrid secure a narrow 1-0 win over RB Leipzig in the first leg of their Champions League clash, last 16 clash.
Real Madrid. Suddenly, they're not thinking about the absence. Superb.
Indonesians have begun voting in their presidential polls. Current Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto is the frontrunner in the elections.
Now, despite concerns over his human rights record and claims of improper support from President Joko Widodo, the outgoing leader has cast his vote in Jakarta. Over 200 million people in the Southeast Asian nation are eligible to cast their ballots and choose their next president.
These elections are being touted as the world's largest single elections. Indonesia is the third largest democracy of the world, and now within hours the world will know the outcome of the biggest race of the day.
However, residents of the Demak Regency in central Java, Indonesia, will not be voting. Head of the voting committee in the Karanganyar sub-district informed that voting has been delayed for the residents of the sub-district and the surrounding villages, which are flooded. These are the visuals. As you can see, the floods have affected at least 21,000 voters, according to the National Disaster Mitigation Agency.
Indonesian authorities were seen making final preparations ahead of Wednesday's elections. Almost 25,000 police personnel are providing security. Remember, Election Day is a national holiday here. Voters will also select local representatives and members of parliament in addition to the president.
The three candidates are in the race to succeed the incumbent President Joko Widodo. Widodo is finishing second in the maximum 2 terms allowed. The biggest party contenders are Ganjar Pranowo and independent Anies Baswedan, and both have been former governors in their 50s. But leading opinion polls is Defence Minister Prabowo Subianto, who is making a third attempt at presidency.
According to various surveys, Prabowo is taking the lead over the other two candidates. Now, a lead that is about 28 points in polls released late last week. Some polls even projected him winning a majority with over 50%. Moreover, Prabowo's election campaign sets him apart from the other two frontrunners. He had turned to social media to reach his young voters. The former general tried to rebrand himself as a cute grandfather. TikTok is flooded with videos of him dancing at rallies, and this strategy has positioned him as an endearing personality among the voters.
President Joko Widodo is also backing Prabowo, and this has led to accusations that he has defied election rules. Now, this has raised concerns that Indonesia, formerly an authoritarian regime, may revert to its totalitarian ways in the election season. The possible consequences go well beyond the boundaries of the nation.
Melihat ketidakadilan terhadap rakyat Palestina yang terus.
Now, for a better understanding what's happening on ground, veteran journalist Dave Grunbaum from Jakarta joins us on World DNA. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Now, Dave, I want to start by asking you about the three candidates. Of course, we know Subianto is in the lead. What can you tell us about what's really struck a chord with the voters when it comes to Subianto and how the other two are positioned?
Yeah, so as you said, Prabowo, he is the front runner. And basically the way he's running, he's saying, look, if you like the incumbent, Joko Widodo, who has 80% approval ratings, if you like him, well, you're going to get more of the same from me. He's trying to ride Widodo's coattails. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? Well, Widodo, he's been so popular because of his infrastructure projects, airports, seaports, highways, and his signature, building a new capital, Nusantara. Widodo also popular for a lot of social aid to the poor. So Subianto, Prabowo Subianto saying you're going to get more of that from me. He's got Widodo's tacit endorsement. In fact, Prabowo's vice presidential running mate is Joko Widodo's eldest son. Now let's look at the other two candidates. We'll start with really who's the real true opposition candidate in this, Anies Baswedan, a former university rector, political scientist. He's the candidate of change, saying, look, the problem what's been going on during Widodo's terms is the rich are getting richer and the poor are staying in the same place, he feels. He feels we've got to try to bring up the poor more. He's also saying we need to relook at this whole idea of building a new capital. Rather than putting so much into one development, maybe we should take the money that's going to Nusantara and take some of that money and put it into more places and develop more economic centers. Then the third candidate I'm talking about here, Ganjar Pranowo, the former governor of Central Jakarta. Some people have nicknamed him Jokowi Light because he's trying to position himself somewhere in the middle. He's basically saying, well, I'm looking at Joko Widodo's projects, kind of keeping them going, but maybe do some tweaking here and there to them. And that's how he's trying to position himself. I do want to also step aside here, just to let you see, we've got a voting station right behind me here. These are all over the place on the streets of Jakarta. Every few streets, you'll see one of these. They make it really easy for the Indonesian people to come out and vote, especially in cities like this. If you look at past history, the voting has been about 75% of eligible voters in past elections have voted. They take their right to vote very seriously here. Mm-hmm. Elections officials think there's a good chance they're going to top 80% with this election.
Dave, of course, you've given us a lot of information there. I also wanted to get another bit of information from you, your thoughts on this regarding Prabowo. Now, there were a lot of allegations on him for human rights abuses all through the 1980s. There were a lot of things that he's been there have been allegations on him for kidnappings. He was also banned in the United States. How has he managed to kind of transform his image? What is making him click this time around? This is a
and to add to that, you know, when he left the army, he was dismissed, dishonorably discharged from the army in 1998 when he was a lieutenant general because of these allegations of the kidnapping. So it is very serious. But we should add that he has denied the allegations throughout his history since. But we should bring out here how he's really rebranded himself. As you said earlier, all the social media, they've got him dancing on stage at campaign events, and it's really clicking with young voters who are going to social media. They've also changed. They try to sort of rewrite the history on it here. They've basically said, oh, Prabowo, you know, he was just doing this, or maybe he was following orders or doing this. And it's just, it's sort of muddying the waters of what people are hearing about his track record. And also keep in mind, there's so many young voters here. Roughly half of the eligible voters in this country are younger than 40. 1/3 are younger than 30. There's a lot of voters who weren't even born yet in 1998. And a lot of them, they don't really teach the history properly in the schools here. So a lot of them, they don't know about it. Everything they're getting is basically coming from the Pro Bono campaign, social media. So you've got a lot of young voters who really don't even know the history here.
So it's the young voters which are kind of driving these polls at the moment. If you feel it's through TikTok that he's able to transform his image and the young voters have all gone in his favor?
That's a huge reason why so many of them have gone in his favor. I mean, again, of course you're going to find young voters who are not with him. Pre-election polling did show that the majority of university-educated young voters did not favor Prabowo, that he did not have the majority of those. But when you get to the non-university, those who maybe finish at high school or even don't have a high school, that's where you see a huge shift going towards Prabowo on this. So he's clearly been able to remake his image. You know, in past elections, he was running under the strongman, tough guy image, you know, the former general. Now he's running under the image of I'm the cute grandfather, and it's caught on.
All right, Dave, thank you so much for joining in and sharing all your insights. That was Dave Grunenbaum joining us from Jakarta in front of a polling station, getting us all the updates from Indonesia.
Thank you.
Well, from that, let's shift our focus now. Thousands of farmer protesters from India's north are now marching towards the capital. They're demanding a legal guarantee on the minimum support prices on all crops.
And among other demands like pensions and debt waivers, these are also things that they are asking for. Talks between the farmers and the government ended inconclusively on Monday night, after which protesters began their march to Delhi on Tuesday. Dramatic scenes unfolded when they were stopped at the Punjab-Haryana border. Tear gas was fired, resulting in several injuries.
Now, the Punjab government has sounded an alert in hospitals located near the Haryana border in the wake of many protesters, in fact, getting injured following clashes with police at Shambhu and the Khanodi borders. Haryana has meanwhile extended suspension of mobile internet services in 7 districts till the 15th of February.
Unrelenting agitators nonetheless decided to continue their march towards Delhi. Farmers camped through the night on the roads as security was ramped up in the capital. The police have erected multi-layered barricading on the roads connecting Delhi, disrupting traffic and resulting in heavy congestion throughout the city.
Now, the latest protest comes from more than 3 years after a year-long farmers' protest round conceded to the immediate demands of the farmers and initiated further talks for other demands. Seeing no substantial steps taken on those demands after 3 years, the protesters are back on the streets, leading a march to the capital.
On 29th of January, long lines of tractors blocked highways near Paris. Farmer unions staged nationwide protests to express their anger over Emmanuel Macron's administration.
Just this month, the French government offered over $400 million for farmers' grievances. The French farmers have lifted their roadblocks from streets, but there are others who claim to have been forgotten by the government.
Now, in the latest, sheep farmers have taken to the streets. A few dozen sheep farmers gathered in front of the Finance Ministry office. They claim that they were the great forgotten ones of the agricultural exception. Dairy farmers staged a protest near the National Assembly, claiming that the prices of milk are not, it doesn't help to sustain the cost of living.
The price of a litre of milk is the same today as it was for my grandparents in 1990. That's a big problem with milk. We're prepared to comply with all standards that have been or are being imposed only if we get a fair price for it.
The small-scale independent farm owners are struggling with the cost of living crisis. 2 weeks after French farmers staged nationwide protests, others have now come out in force to air their grievances. These issues include European Union sustainability policies, to the effects of the war in Ukraine, rising prices and competition from imports.
Et on est là pour vous faire connaître que vous avez du bon produit. Spanish, españoles.
On to all the news now from the world of business. Now, as we mentioned earlier, just months before India goes to polls to elect its next government, thousands of farmers are marching towards the capital to protest.
Now, security has been tightened around the borders of the Indian capital as farmers clash with the police. The latest is dubbed as Farmers Protest 2.0 and comes 2 years after the government repealed 3 contentious farm laws.
The question is, what are the demands of the protesting farmers? They want a law that guarantees a minimum support price or MSP for all crops. MSP, that's the benchmark price that's set by the government for 20 crops twice a year to boost farmers' income. But state agencies buy only rice and wheat at the support level to build up stocks of the world's biggest food welfare scheme. This benefits around just 7% of the farmers who raise those crops, and the government's food scheme, or the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, gives free rice and wheat to 800 million Indians. This is the biggest government subsidy that costs about $24.7 billion a year.
Farmers, mainly from the Indian states of Punjab and Haryana, are seeking guarantees for a significant hike in the MSP that Hem just mentioned. They want at least 50% profit over the production cost. Other demands include monthly pensions for farmers over 60 years and land in the capital to honor martyrs of previous protests. However, the government argues that a legal MSP would impact global prices, export competitiveness and subsidy expenditure. Farm policy experts also believe that buying all crops at support prices is economically not viable.
Now, how is the Farmers' Protest 2.0 different from the previous in 2020 to 21? Now, the previous one, India's biggest in years, was against the government's introduction of 3 farm laws. The Modi administration got rid of those contentious laws in 2021 after a year-long protest. Farmers are now saying that the government is taking too long to keep the promise of forming a consortium to decide on the support prices. This time around, the centre is also proactively trying to resolve the ongoing deadlock.
Next up, let's take a look at the developments from the world of technology.
Now, musicians fear that AI will mark the end of their craft. However, at a music trade show in California, visitors had a generally enthusiastic response regarding the use of new AI music technology. The U.S. National Association of Music Merchants trade show displayed a variety of new production tools and AI instruments. Luthier Doishi, who is the founder of the OD Guitars, uses AI to design natural geometric guitars.
AI helped me imagine or explore things that otherwise maybe I would have never thought of. So when I am limited to my imagination, AI thinks differently and picks all sorts of information in order to create something new.
Generative AI is capable of creating content including original sounds, lyrics or an entire song on its own. For people present at the trade show, there was nothing but excitement for what AI could do for the music industry in the coming years.
With that change, there will be more things that people can do, new skills that people can learn, more things that they can create that they couldn't create in the past, right?
Well, it's the season of love, so why should anyone be left behind? A Swedish dating app is helping transform the lives of individuals with intellectual disabilities and autism by offering a safe and inclusive platform for love and connections.
I've
tried other dating apps and sites for able-bodied people, and in there I've noticed that it was more difficult to be transparent about my disability. I lied by saying that I had none.
The app has been designed exclusively for people with autism or mild intellectual or cognitive disabilities, especially for those with an IQ between 50 and 69. The app's interface is quite easy to use with just a profile page, a discussion forum and a help button option. Users will have to undergo a registration procedure to ensure user safety, who are often victims of abuse on social media.
It's a group that is particularly exposed to violence, which means that on other dating apps, it might be more difficult to follow up with the content, images or text. Many say that they have been exposed to several things, and that is why they want an app which is secure and safe.